once I stopped trying to be palatable, I became more popular. We're all so encouraged, I think, to run around trying to be palatable. And the difficulty in that is our idea of palatable isn't real. So we're doing what we think they want, but it's what we think they want. And we're not psychics, or at least I'm not.
This is Only the Bold, where I have deep, riveting, and fascinating conversations with truly phenomenal humans. I'm your gay, ADHD-having, and compulsively curious host, Gia Goodrich, and among many things, I can't get enough of hearing people's incredible stories and getting inside the way their brains work. Each week, I have conversations where we dig below the surface and really uncover everything it takes to live a truly bold life. Despite the messages we get from media and popular culture, the boldest, truest version of yourself is exactly what the world needs. Hello, hi, hey, you beautiful, bold soul, you. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, today is just one of those good days I have to share because we know neurodivergent, lots of stuff going on, lots of sensory stuff. My back has been real rough for the last 2 months. The last month, really aggressively, twice a week, I've been working with a corrective chiropractor. Shout out to Dr. Tim at Body in Motion, the best, to help me get over things. Today, he told me that I'm officially 70% recovered because I asked him, on a scale of 0 being shit show when you first saw me, 10 being totally recovered, no memory of this, where would I be falling right now? What would you think? And he gave me a 7. So I'm feeling very excited about that, but that's not what I wanted to share. What I wanted to share actually is that I was very brave today. And I actually said it out loud. I was like, I did a really good job. Imagine this. I am this little sensory weirdo, and all of my life, it's not like anybody did it on purpose, but you just end up kind of getting gaslit by society. And I think everybody has this type of memory where it's like you had an emotion and it was perceived to be too big. And so you got told to shut it down, or you had a need that you expressed and somebody rolled their eyes or inferred that you shouldn't have that need, right? We all have these experiences that accumulate over time that make us question our own internal pings. And for me, a big part of that has been sensory stuff, like my cousin Desiree, who I fucking love, from Black Honey Wellness, who's amazing. The biggest fight we ever got into was about lights. We were trying to watch a movie and I couldn't do the bright TV in a dark room sort of thing. Of course, we didn't have the language at the time because we were I think early teens, late teens or something. We didn't have the language to be like, hey, I have a sensory difference, blah, blah, blah. So it just seemed like I was being a diva. And so we almost got, got pretty close to knock down, drag out about it. So anyways, I've had this really tense relationship with figuring out how to express my needs, all of these things. And for whatever reason, the thought of that little donut shaped thing that you're supposed to put your face into, when you get a massage or when you go to the chiropractors, is just a full body, no fucking way for me. Just 100% no. When I went there the first time, he had the tissue paper sterile thing over it. And I was like, just so you know, I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD and a sprinkle of autism. And that is not going to happen. So he is just so generous and amazing. So for the last month, I have been using my arms to hold my head, and he's just been very generously working around things. No big deal. And today, I can't even tell you why, but I had this surge of bold energy. I can do this. I'm ready. I had just said, today's going to be the day. I am going to put my face in the donut. And he was just kind of okay, not even 100% sure that I would, because he just felt, I think, energetically this whole time that it was just not even an option on the table. And so me putting my face initially through it, with the little toilet paper seat vibe sort of cover, was just, and I had my mask on, it was just So my body was definitely reacting in kind of this panic way. And so I was able to calm myself down. I have this great fidget ring. If you're on YouTube, you can see I have this great, I think it's called the Conquer ring, which I just love. Hashtag not sponsored, but I love them, that I had. And so I was just kind of keeping myself calm. And he went to town because for the last month, he hasn't been able to. And so he went to town. He was so excited. And I was just keeping myself calm, doing all of this internal work, because it really feels to me the equivalence, I think, is when I've heard people talk about who have claustrophobia going into an MRI machine, where it's just that panic sets in. There's just something about it that your body is no, screaming no. And because I just sensed that I was in this place today, my pain was lower than it has been. And I was in this good mood. And I really felt like I had a relationship because I've been working on this shit. The somatic relationship, my body and trying to be more in tune, I felt like I could handle it. And so I really was like pulling out all the stops to like deep breathe and be okay and everything. And then we do it. It's great. He goes to town. We go to the next table, which usually I'm on my back for. And he's like, oh, no, this is on your face too. And so I wasn't expecting that. So I take another deep breath. I'm like, okay, I literally say to myself out loud, you can do this. It's fine. Get on there. And it's called a drop table. I've never heard about this. I'm new to corrective chiropractor, all of this thing, but it is like this sort of jarring, like clunk that happens. And so not only is my face in the donut that is already mildly panicking, I am now having this harsh, like boom, boom happening. That happens. We're fine. We're all feeling good. My back has been feeling so much better. I roll onto my back where I usually am on this table and he's like looking at my neck or whatever. And I was just like, I'm really proud of myself. I did a really good job. Now, mind you, I'm 38 years old and I think Dr. Tim is like roughly my age too. So I am expressing myself like a 7-year-old that is like very excited about getting a ribbon for showing up, a participation ribbon. And he was just so generous and was like, you really did. And it was just this like super fabulous act of generosity of really like owning what my bold list looked like this morning, which might not be a big deal to anybody else, but I'm telling you, to me, it was fucking major. To be able to express gratitude for myself and then have him mirror that was just such a beautiful, wonderful thing. So I just had to share that with you because I feel like we go through life being programmed to not really honor and not really accept and not really embrace the things about us that are awesome and really give us that credit for when we're showing up in a great way, whether it's a small incremental step or a monumental leap. Like how often do we show up where we're just like, oh, next thing, and not even really taking a moment to breathe in and really accept that we did something awesome, that we showed up in a great way, that we are somewhere that a past version of ourselves couldn't even imagine. And a great example of this is I remember like dreaming about getting to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. This moment. And then when it finally came, there was so much kind of stickiness and whatever and overwhelm. And I had already been so adept at this hedonic treadmill situation that I still haven't even ordered to get my plaque. So this is a good, call me out. Make sure I order that plaque because it's a big deal. So today I just hope this episode is going to be major when it comes to this idea. And it's probably where this inspiration came from, is like this idea of self-love, compassion, being a reflection and putting people in your universe that reflect the best parts of yourself, showing up with accountability and seeing people for who they are, really dealing with your emotions. And what I love about Jeffrey is that they called me out in the most loving, kind way and really would not let me get away with some of this negative stuff that I have going on. And you'll hear there are a couple moments in the episode that you can listen for when it is just like so obvious that they were just like, honey, we're not doing that. And how beautiful and wonderful to be able to have interactions and have people that are operating in this way that is so generous and so loving that they can help you see yourself in that way and catch yourself when you're falling into these old habits and old patterns. Because being bold is not possible to show up in this sort of sustainable way when we are not actively embracing and loving ourselves. And trust me, I have tried for a long time, and this is why I'm finally winding around to it. So this is going to be such an amazing episode. I'm so glad you are in for the ride. And I just want to say really quickly before we dive into it is that a couple episodes ago, I had this amazing conversation with Gary Vee's executive life coach, Beth Handel. We enjoyed it so much that we are going to be doing a workshop together that is live over Zoom March 1st. So the link is in the description. I highly recommend you join us. It is free. We get to hang out and do some live work through sessions. So I'm really excited for that. If you feel called to do it, I will see you there, and let's roll into the episode. Today's guest is one of the world's most prolific and impactful commentators on the non-binary identity and activism. They're the author of a book that's changed hundreds of thousands of lives, the best-selling Buddhist self-esteem guide, How to Be You, published by Penguin Random House. No big deal. It's a lovely introduction into owning the beautiful complexity that is each of us. And I, of course, having the delightfully neurodivergent brain, jumped through the audio version at 3x speed. So I actually felt like I had them in my ears, reshaping my self-construct in the best way whilst my body was being kept busy so I could actually integrate that information. Their spiritual and inclusive messages received over 1 billion views on social media. They've been featured in virtually every major publication and TV network. I am not being hyperbolic, and I am not going to name them all because we would literally be here all day if I tried to list them out, so I'm not going to. So you just have to trust me. They are everywhere. And what's even more impressive and incredible is that they were the first prominent public figure to use and advocate the use of they, them pronouns for trans and gender nonconforming people. I cannot overstate the tremendous impact of this individual and what they've had on broader culture, but more importantly, on the countless lives of people spanning all ages that have learned to honor and appreciate who they are despite the callous and unloving contexts they might find themselves in. The generous, absolutely sparkle-tastic, and profoundly bold soul, Jeffrey Marsh.
Now I'm crying. So, okay, let's just sit with that. I think maybe that was the most lovely intro I've ever had for anything.
Oh, thank you.
We all have, a lot of us anyway, have like the stock bio that everybody just reads. You have, workshopped with your partner and edited and stuff like that and is on your website, right? But you went above and beyond and you said such beautiful things. I couldn't do anything but smile and then cry. So,
well, thank you. That has actually been something that was really important to me with the podcast. It's always been about like genuine connection. And especially with people like you do this for a living. You talk and show up and are interviewed and create content all the time. What's fascinating is getting to know and seeing the actual human. And what I loved is just, in this small way, I can start off with this generosity in letting you know that like I deeply value who you are and the way you're showing up in the world.
I value the way you're showing up today. And can I tell you something sad?
Sure.
People listening cannot see your makeup look. That is sad. They got to seek out the video. You got to go wherever it's posted and look because you brought it today.
I brought it with full intentionality in your honor because I knew that I would be sharing. Don't throw this back on me. I would be sharing that digital space, and I'm like, okay, you need to like step up your game. You need to take time. You need to like really reflect the inner fabulosity that you can bring to the table, but are oftentimes a little too lazy to do that because it's fucking Jeffrey Marsh. So thank you for appreciating that.
I don't know if I should just let you calling yourself lazy just pass by. Do we want to talk about it? Were you just kind of mentioning it to the side? I don't know, but I find it difficult not to mention it.
Well, I mean, this is maybe a good point to start because one of the things in your book and all of your messages is this idea of how are you punishing yourself for not being perfect? And it was just like, oof, yeah. For myself as gay, ADHD having, mixed black, like a little baby human that was always told there was so much, that there's so much internalized stories about things. And one of the issues with me, like many other neurodivergents, is the internalized story of being lazy when you're not performing in a way that has to do with other people's expectations. So I love that you like caught that, see that. Mm-mm.
I mean, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
I was about to say the thing I love most about you, but there are just too many. One thing I love about you is how open you are. It's not just internal stories. It's such a big part of your work that there are these external stories, right? You just mentioned other people, and that is a really tricky spiritual place for everyone. We can take a look inside, we can use our tools, we can journal, we can do a lot of things, but there's also a society out there judging us.
Okay, so this brings me to you as the human behind all of the content creation. What's the shape of the wave that undulates when you think about the feedback that you're constantly getting? And what does that feel like to you as a person who clearly is called to make in such a prolific way? I'm taking a quick pause just to remind you that we are doing that fabulous workshop, myself and the incredible Beth Handel, who is the biggest of the big deal when it comes to executive life coaches. And we are doing this workshop called Design Your Dream Life and Kick Self-Sabotage to the Curb. So if you are at all feeling like you are not able to integrate the habits that you want, that you are not fully showing up with your most magnetic, bold energy, I invite you to come hang out with us. It's live over Zoom, it's free, and it's a great chance for us to connect and work through some of the stuff together, because there's nothing worse than unrealized potential. And I have just been seeing so much benefit from really intentionally putting time and energy into figuring out what those pieces are for me that are blocking them and gently setting them aside. So if that feels like something that resonates with you, just pause what you're doing, go to the episode, click the link and register. It will literally take you 30 seconds. You will be done. You will be on your way. And I will see you March 1st.
Somebody commented on one of my recent posts about parenting and LGBTQ kids and, being kind to your kid who's LGBTQ. And this person commented, I don't think you should post about these things because this is what homophobes really latch onto, that we're corrupting kids and et cetera, et cetera. And I commented back to that person, I don't comment based on what homophobes will or won't do, period.
What a concept.
What a concept. And of course, I've been doing this long enough to know that every single thing I do will get used by people with bad intentions. They'll just cut the video in whatever way, they'll take the words out of context, they'll make up words, whatever, and it will just suit whatever their agenda is. And one of the things I love about talking to you and, getting the chance to be on this podcast, it's a bit of a space where that stuff doesn't matter. My favorite cartoon of all time that I have it saved on my phone, like cartoon from the newspaper, if you remember those. It's a Far Side cartoon, and it's a person in hell with a wheelbarrow doing work, I guess, hell work. And the person is whistling. And you can see like their lips are, whistling and got notes coming out. They're just having a good time whistling with this wheelbarrow. And off to the side, one devil is saying to the other devil, no matter what we do, we just can't get through to that guy. And it's like, that's where I want to live. There's a lot that's horrible and bad about our world and our reality, and we should acknowledge those things. But also, I'm in a different place than the homophobes, and that's okay.
Mic drop moment. How is it for the people in your life? Like, are you constantly like just dropping these like pithy, deep bombs that are like insightful AF and people are just like, oh, but I really just wanted to bitch about my boyfriend right now. But like, how is that interaction? Or do you have like a cutoff switch?
I am an extremely high maintenance friend. I require so much from people. That's good for some people, and that's not good for other people. If somebody feels like they need to vent about something, that's absolutely fine. We can vent. And I'll also hold you accountable for being kind to yourself. Just my jam 24/7, all walks of life.
I love that.
I decided a long time ago, if it's annoying for people, that's, their problem.
They're not your people. Yeah, which totally makes sense to me. I'm definitely known like in my friend group as like the one that can't keep it surface level. So people know what time of day it is when they're interacting with me. Cause I'm like, what? So why? And what's underneath? And how is that functioning? But it's just because I can't turn my brain off. I'm just always that Y kid that wants to go deeper.
So WHY, you said you're the Y kid?
Yeah.
Funny story, when I was at the Buddhist monastery, living there, we weren't encouraged to ask why questions, only how questions. So meaning not why am I this way?
Mm-hmm.
Because most people, every time they ask why, it ends with what's wrong with you. We were encouraged to ask how, as in how did I get here? How did this training happen? How did I end up not liking who I am? Questions like that.
I understand that because it's like my great friend Mark, who's, a CEO and a yogi. Like he's that friend for me that's always like breaking it down and talks about, it's the difference between hauling all of this luggage and asking yourself, what's in it? What's inside my luggage? Or just like setting it down, which I think is an adage that people are familiar with. So I agree, like in a deep sense, when we're looking at ourselves about why. But I also feel like, at least for me, that there is this sort of deeper generosity and compassion that you can arrive at when you ask why also. So like the example that I use when I talk about, uncovering your deep why, it's like this, well, what's on the face of it? Why do I want to be making pictures? And then it's because, I want to interact with fascinating people. Well, why? Because I always wanted to be fascinating myself. Well, why did you, and when you keep getting to it, you eventually arrive at this like very resonant sort of place that's in touch with your inner child version of yourself that just wanted to be seen or whatever. And so tapping into that source and leading with that energy allows you to then infuse that in what you're doing in a way that's more conscious instead of not having as much clarity around what you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to study Buddhism with a lady. So what I think she was getting at, the guide of the monastery, was the limitations of thinking and how it's great. Well, I didn't know I was going to go here, but I just love you so much. So I'm just going to go right to the heart of it. So many of us had to be really smart in order to survive our childhood. And by that, I mean we had to kind of be one step ahead of people that we had to sort of manage so that we would be safe. And we had to be really smart to do that. And so many of us throughout our lives keep surviving our childhood by trying to be smart. And so there's a limit to how much you can think about your spiritual issues, how much you can make a to-do list to fix it, how much you can get into the vocab and the making it an intelligence exercise.
Yes.
Sometimes you got to just go there and be ultra kind and loving to yourself as an action, not a thought process.
I feel like you just reached into my soul and like gave it a squeeze. We're like, there you are.
In a good way?
In a way that was activating and truthful.
Okay, good.
I am very new to this emotions conversation, which I think is funny and kind of surprising to people because the way that I show up in the content I create is very passionate, is very vulnerable. And also, I have always had a very strong disconnect from the feeling part of me. Actually, yesterday I'm working with an intuitive healer person to help me like reconnect and all of this stuff. And it's very exciting and also uncomfortable because it taps into my skepticism. It's just like, it activates like all the things. And she was just like, well, I said hello to your back. And this is the back that's been hurting and like making it borderline me able to function in a lot of ways. And she's like, I said hello. And there's just so much anger there. And it's just like, I'm having this invitation to really start to activate it. And that I think like in your book, like you dedicating so much of it to this relationship of accepting yourself by accepting your emotions. And like I said, it was like you were literally in my ears. I was just like, okay, let's do this. Let's go here. For me, anyways, it's a deeply uncomfortable process to try to get in there and poke around after decades of just like, no thanks.
We have to talk about misogyny and queerphobia, right? And sort of the expectations on young people and how anger is such a huge one. And little girls are not permitted to be angry, period, or encouraged to. And as a general rule, kids are not necessarily allowed to be angry at their parents. So we all sort of end up feeling like anger is a huge danger zone. But my goodness, the freedom, the conflation a lot of people have of anger with violence, because that's the kind of anger they grew up witnessing. Shall I speak for myself? That's the kind of anger I grew up witnessing. And I didn't want to be a violent person. And so I ended up never wanting to be an angry person. But they're two different things. And I have a lot to be angry about. Being angry and letting it out is just such a freeing, beautiful, kind exercise.
And how do you let it out? What does that look like for you?
I used to clean the bathroom angrily.
Rage cleaning. Yes, that is one thing I do.
It's just like run around the block, let it, it is an excess. Excess is in quotes, right? It is the amount of energy you have, but it's a larger amount than we're used to. So just point it wherever is safe for you. My friend, I'll never forget it. This was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I had just been broken up with. My friend told me to go into her bedroom. I was over at my friend's apartment. And my friend said, now go into my bedroom and don't come out until you're angry. And I was like, what? I'm not angry. I mean, my ex is just going through things, and his parents weren't nice to him, and all the stuff that we come up with.
Right.
And my friend was like, no, just go in there. And I ended up getting angry and I ended up hitting her bed with her pillow and screaming and just being red-faced and angry for maybe the first time in my life where I was allowed to. And that was just turning a corner for me because it wasn't hurtful for anyone. And it felt so good to do.
And you saying that now, I just realized that I think as a kid, because I was always in soccer, there was this natural place, and I was a very aggressive soccer player.
I can picture it.
I threw elbows that should not have been thrown, lots of things. There was this expression and mechanism for that, as well as because I was also in dance. So there was also this place to express all of my emotions in this very visceral, cathartic, celebrated way. And then as an adult, everything just stopped. It's interesting to think about it now that I actually had a lot of outlets as a kid that I think helped me cope in a lot of ways, but then just yanked them out of my experience. And so it's like, no wonder it's been a struggle for you. There's been no avenues for that.
I admire you so much. There are so few people who are even taking a look at this stuff, let alone trying to be kind about what they're seeing. So it's not like we have to do it perfectly or get it right or be productive in dealing with our emotions, productive being in quotes. We kind of just have to be willing to go there and let it be messy, really. That was my experience.
Paint me a picture. What does it look like when you are messy and bratty and frustrated? Because you do have this, I mean, when I think of you and your content and the way that you show up in the world, it is like this nurturing, loving, sort of ethereal blanket that's wrapped around your humanness.
C'est moi. You got it. Yes, that's me.
I know that there's got to be emotional fluctuation. So like, what does that look like when you're having a ragey, bratty moment before you catch yourself?
My partner and I have been together for 11 and a half years now. We're married. He's the handiest person. He's the closest person. So when there are those times where something like a wave of childhood trauma is coming back, right? I'm believing something that's not true that is making me upset. Can you picture it?
Mm-hmm.
When that's coming up and around, he's the person that's close by. So we have learned how to communicate with each other, and he has learned how to say, this is okay, this is not okay, what's going on for you, tell me what's up, stuff like that. Bless him. He's so wonderful. I have learned to train myself to talk kindly to myself. You mentioned I've been on a lot of TV, and I was on Newsmax, for heaven's sake, talking about being non-binary on Newsmax, and they were very hostile. The host of the show was very hostile. The whole time in my head, I'm thinking, I love you, Jeffrey. Thank you for doing this. I'm glad you're here. That's what I try to do 24/7.
Hashtag goals. One of the things I did want to talk to you about was this nurturing aspect and energy. And when I came out, it was a little bit rough and rocky, and I was working through a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of performativity happening and a lot of acting out of toxic masculinity in order to prove my belonging in the lesbian community. All things that we understand, but experience as being deeply regrettable. A lot of objectifying women in order to prove something. And thankfully, lots of stuff is healed. We've had lots of conversations and, like, I'm better. And it took a lot of self-forgiveness. All of that is to say, I had this group of like fairy gay mothers, is what I call them, that they're, I think, like 30 years older than me. And they're just this like group of amazing women that would take me out dancing and talk to me about my breakup and just like guided me into this world in a way that was centered, because everybody else in my life was very much in the newness, in the beginning, in the baby aspect of it. So we were still in a lot of our trauma stories, trying to figure out how we identify. The way that you show up feels like it definitely has that energy to it. I'm going to make a guess, and you can tell me like, Gia, no, that's totally wrong. But my guess is that you have become a version of yourself that is a reflection of what you most needed when you were a child. And so now you're able to do that for other people. Does that resonate at all, or?
Yeah, and I do it for myself. I make videos selfishly too, because I'm saying what I want to hear. And I love that other people benefit and find some connection with it.
Was it conscious, or was it something that you were working through that you arrived at and was sort of like, oh, this is the way that I'm showing up because this is what I needed? Or was there like an intentionality there when you started creating videos and doing this in a more public way?
I mean, the very first time that I gained recognition was around 2013-ish on Vine.
Yeah.
RIP Vine. So many good creative communities on there that just poof, disappeared.
And that took an element of mastery to be able to deliver things in such a tight timeline. Like, wasn't it like 9 seconds? Like
9 seconds would have been a luxury.
What was it?
6.5 seconds on Vine. I'm telling you, we used that 0.5 seconds. But that is literally just enough time to say, there is nothing wrong with you.
Mm.
And I just experimented one day saying stuff that I wanted to hear. And that really was the genesis of it. And other people resonated with that. And of course, we can talk about it if you want. Other people really had a visceral, hateful, evil reaction to it as well. Because people that look like me, sound like me, are like me, are absolutely not supposed to love themselves or have a kind demeanor or whatever.
Did you feel, or do you feel now, I guess, this sense of responsibility to be palatable, if that makes sense? One of the things we talked about in a previous episode is this idea of like how race has become expanded, right? And so there are a lot of people who are my age that were always seen as people of color. Now they're considered to be white passing. It creates all of this erasure and, and all of these things. And one of the ways to look at it that's been more helpful is talking about palatability, because it's not that these people aren't people of color. It's that institutions have decided that there is something we would rather hear this person moving in through the world in this way versus this one. My guess would be, and again, I could be totally wrong, but my guess would be that in you being this first touch point for so many people, that with that would maybe come this pressure of feeling like you have to show up in this way that's as palatable as possible, because you're not only functioning as yourself, but also as a symbol or like a floodgate that is going to potentially determine how they're going to view everybody else who's non-binary that they come into contact with, which feels like a lot.
Well, there are two things you make me think of. It's such a wonderful discussion, because if I represent, quote unquote, all non-binary people to someone, that person has more issues than I can help them with, right?
Yeah.
If they just think one person represents all non-binary people, they got a few things to work out. I don't feel any obligation to help them work them out. Mm-hmm. The other thing is the great irony that you're hinting at. If I'm spending all my time trying to be palatable, I'm actually not giving people an example of a non-binary person. I'm giving people an example of someone who's trying to be palatable, which is different. So I had to totally give up on trying to have things look a certain way, be a certain way, sound a certain way. We were sort of discussing it before, right? I'm not posting for the homophobes. I'm not posting so that people will not be hurtful toward trans and LGBTQ people, because they're going to do it anyway. I'm honestly posting for my own heart, for the hearts of others. And if anybody wants to come around to be part of that heart together, they're absolutely welcome to do it. If they're not there yet, they can enjoy their lives, but far away. Over there.
Yes, sending love and light. Bye-bye.
I love you from a distance, that kind of thing.
And maybe this is a projection of my own way of dealing with trauma, is that I feel like that is one of the magnetic poles that I have that I'm not rocking with. And the other is that I know that I've had access to a lot of spaces as somebody who has more privilege, and to be in conversations where, like I'll say specifically, as a photographer, I would have these conversations in rooms about casting, about creating inclusive campaigns. And I knew that I had the wiggle room to say things that maybe somebody else wouldn't be able to say. And so I felt like I had this responsibility. And I also felt like, because I was this type of bridge kid, I tried my best to make sure that the experience was positive, knowing that, like, let's say in this world of campaigns, for example, people are going to take a risk once. And if their hand gets burned, they're going to yank it back and think, ooh, I don't want to go down this road again, this inclusive whatever. It was too hard. It was too jarring, whatever. And so I personally felt this weight of not only trying to make sure that whatever the thing we would do was as meaningful and as inclusive and as authentic as possible, but also the experience was such that even if there were like challenging moments, that it wouldn't be a turnoff to them, so that they would continue to do it. And I think in that negotiation, there was probably a lot of self-sacrificing on my part, trying to show up in a particular way.
That was an extremely well-described version of your circumstances. It must feel like poop, though.
Yes.
Okay, just checking in on that. And that's because people perceive you, in terms of race as a certain way.
I am a minority trifecta, right? So when people hired me...
Triple threat.
Exactly. They got a little this, little that, little this. And because I know that, like, when I say something, because of the way I grew up, the way I speak, it is received often better by people who are in dominant culture, powerful positions. I felt this responsibility because there were campaigns where I was like, okay, we're representing the LGBTQ rainbow, and that's great. Also, I don't know if you knew, but a cis drag queen and a trans person aren't the same thing. I felt this pressure to really try to create as soft of a landing as possible, so they wouldn't just recoil and say, well, fuck this. We're never going to even try to go down this road.
That's a lot of pressure.
True.
I mean, it says a lot about them that they would require of you a safe space or a soft landing, as you put it. That says a lot about them and the environment, but it also, I just feel for you in that case. The ironic thing that I found is, once I stopped trying to be palatable, I became more popular. More people were interested. When it was like, I don't even think of it as speaking my mind necessarily, but the more blunt I was and the less I tried to couch things in quote unquote palatable language, the more I just told the truth in a video as plainly as possible, the more people leaned into that and had an engagement with it and said, oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. Because we're all so encouraged, I think, to run around trying to be palatable. And the difficulty in that is our idea of palatable isn't real. So we're doing what we think they want, but it's what we think they want. And we're not psychics, or at least right. I'm not. So it's like, I'm doing this version in my head of a thing that I think will make you like me, but I don't know you. And I'm just sort of like skating on what I've been told I'm supposed to do. There's just this whole scaffold that's completely made up and makes us, I think, in the long run, not so palatable because we're just not relating human to human.
That's why I love content creation. And I believe in it so much as a mechanism, because the difference between me feeling like I can 100% show up as myself, and be full authentic, whatever, is because there wasn't this whole gatekeeping structure between the medium and the message. In those contexts, there were so many people, like I was just a cog in the machine. And so it was this like tap dance to try to figure things out. Whereas being able to create content and develop this one-to-one connection with people by being authentic, to me, it's like one of the most powerful things that you can do, because people can really see themselves in you and really resonate with what you're saying, because it's not being diluted with tap dancing, palatability, if you're intentionally choosing to show up in an authentic way.
Yes, and we might as well acknowledge, and we can talk about it if you want, I get more opportunities as a white person. I realized a while ago, I get meetings at a network to talk about maybe doing a TV show, and the executives are like, "What are you? I don't get it." Sorry, I don't mean to mock folks, but they're like, "What is this? I don't understand it." My Black non-binary friends can't even get a meeting. It's like a different world. And so when it comes to palatability, I don't know what my point is, except that I guess I have that going for me. Certain people will listen to me because I'm white.
What I hear inferred in what you just said is embracing and accepting the container that you are, like where things come from, instead of fighting with that. Because to me, a lot of the conversations around privilege and access are so important. And also, I think without a lot of really acute stewardship of where you take it, it can make us feel like we don't belong, right? Because it's like, you've been fighting your life all this time to feel worthy of taking space. And then it's this conversation where it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't be taking up space and internalizing things in a negative way. And yeah, it's just nuanced and complicated. And I don't think I have an answer for any of it.
Well, that's good because I don't think there is an answer. It is all an exploration and a discussion. Some people will never be able to wrap their minds around who I am. That's just simply, I don't think in my lifetime, certainly not going to be universal, but I don't even know if in my lifetime there will be most of the people on earth will accept people like me. Don't know. I would be delighted to be surprised, but only thing I'm trying to do is move that needle forward in any way that I can. And I realized a long time ago, I need to be out from under my self-imposed pressure to be able to do that. When I talk to allies, so people like me went from, oh my gosh, why is that person in a dress? Like, what a freak, you know, years ago, to now people are afraid to say the wrong words around us, like afraid to use the wrong pronouns and so forth, right? So it's like, no matter how you slice it, we're the weird ones in the room and we're the ones that put people on edge. Even though there's been this transition for people wanting to accommodate us, they're just afraid. And so I try to just be as open-hearted and kind and, I tell allies, you will screw it up. That's how it happens. And then you hear feedback and then you do the next thing, right? And that's just a part of it. And you're going to have to get over a fear of screwing it up if you want to be effective and supportive.
I used to say about like my race, because I always used to get, what are you? In that respect, I've always had a deep kinship with the in-between space. Like maybe 15 years ago, when one of my great friends came out as non-binary, like to me, it was just like, oh yeah, this makes sense. You know what I mean? Because it was just like that dissonance. And this is what I started to realize as I got older. It was that I was creating dissonance for people, that they looked at me and they were like, what are you? And some people, were like, what are you? And some people were like, no, what the fuck are you? And that dissonance can feel really uncomfortable for people. And then in order to reconcile it, they project it onto you, like, fix this for me. I need to figure it out. What's going on here? And I wonder if, on the same token, with people who are allies who are trying really hard, it's a similar dissonance, but it's more, I think of myself as a good person and a good ally. And you're telling me that I didn't show up that way and that dissonance has the same amount of pain that they want to back away from.
Yeah, well said. It's going to be painful. Sorry. Not much I can do about it.
Sorry, not sorry.
And that's how it happens. When people are willing to show up, that's why I feel grateful. And I post about that so much. When people are willing to be vulnerable and say the wrong thing. I've long known about this, and I would love your take on it. People have this obsession with getting it before they'll respect me. They hold up this prerequisite of, I need to get it. And then once I get it, I'll respect you. But meanwhile, it's like, I'm talking about humanity and the soul and gender in ways that you actually will never get. And that's the point, that it's outside the usual. It's outside what you were taught. We're going in a different direction so that we can be kind and accommodate people like me. I would be surprised if you got it. And I don't mean that in a mean way. You weren't told about people like me. So how could I possibly present myself in a way that you'll get unless you choose to respect me first without getting it? And then we can have a human-to-human, heart-to-heart conversation about what it was like for you to grow up around gender and roles and, what it was like for me and what the things we have in common and the things we don't. And to me, respect has got to come first. And people forget that constantly.
Absolutely. And I feel like that sense of the self-identification as like a knower, an understander versus a learner is huge. And I spent a lot of my life identifying as, going back to, as a coping mechanism, identifying as smart and identifying as all of these very static identities that if you put me in one room, I might be the smartest in the room and then I would feel great. You put me in another room and I might not be the smartest in the room and then I would not feel good. And it created this type of teetering, capricious energy to my ability to just be me. And then transitioning to this more growth mindset of like, okay, what if, and that was how I was able to access it, is just starting to ask questions like, what if I'm able to just be a learner and like get it wrong and allow that to be okay? Like, what if, I just allow myself to show up in the shitty capacity that it may look like today and tomorrow maybe do better. Like, can I create space for that? Because I think for a lot of people, you've been studying Buddhism for like 20 years, right?
Correct.
You're arguably light years from where some of us are. But one of the things I'm really working on now is like, how can I be kind to myself in a way where like affirmations are eye-rolly? And so to me, the entry point that maybe affirmations where it's like, you're a bad bitch, you're fabulous, I love you, is something that I can graduate to and start with, what if you're not as bad as you think you are in moments?
I think most people, the point of affirmations is to undercut the constant flow of mental sewage, the constant self-hate, just the horrible, you're terrible, you're trash, you shouldn't have done that, they're going to laugh at you, right? Everything, that tape that was installed in our heads. And if I'm walking around saying something, at least I'm not saying something self-hatey, right? Except, again, we're all too smart for our own good. And if I walk around saying like, I'm the most amazing person in the world, there's this other voice that comes in and says, that's not true. I always strive to just tell the simple truth as best I can to myself. I'm here with you. Thank you for who you are. I love you occasionally. And that to me is really, really safe territory for something to try. But as you're pointing out, it's if we've lived with what I would call the negative self-talk, right, loop, if we've lived with that our whole lives, of course, anything else is going to feel eye-rolly.
Yes, square me territory. So in talking about like changing that and like interrupting that for young minds, I have to tell you, one of my favorite things about you as the person that you are, creating the work that you do, is that you make content for kids and speak to them in a way that is just like so loving and accepting. And, it's like that kindergarten teacher that we wish we had sort of vibes. Why for you that's felt like such an important thing when you know and you have gotten so, I mean, the deluge of resistance is so major when you're dealing with people who have bigoted beliefs and then they're thinking about those in relationship to kids.
It's really unfortunate to me because kids are a huge motivating factor for hate. And it seems really ironic to me. I sort of feel like leave the kids out of this, right? If you hate people like me, just come out and say it. But that's my personal opinion. I have never experienced a level of hate like I did for those kids' videos. Not just like we need to protect the children, which has been used against marginalized people throughout history. I think of, the Salem witch trials. There were accusations against Jewish people during World War II that they're doing things to kids. And the Jim Crow South, let's face it, accusations against Black people, Black men specifically. This, we need to save the children, I always can easily dismiss because I see the tradition behind it, the vast history of that. But when people are doxing you, trying to come to where you live, shall we say, talking about the Second Amendment a lot in emails to you, stuff like that, it reaches a level of real that is a choice point. I needed to sit down with myself and say, it's totally fine if you want to stop doing this. Do you want to keep doing this? And sitting with that, I realized yes. And so the only thing to do from then was to make my life as safe as possible, tell my partner I love him very much, live every moment to the fullest, so that if something happens, if it's my time to go, shall we say, that I know that I've done everything I can to have loved every minute before going.
I got goosebumps just thinking about how real that conversation has to be for you and your loved ones, just for sharing a message of love and acceptance. And historically, like we know this has been a thing ever since ever, that those messages and the people with those messages can be met with like tragedy.
A few historical examples on that point, yes.
Yes, there are a few. But I feel like my brain wants to say that can't be now.
2022, you mean?
Yeah. And I mean, and I know I've spent most of my life in bubbles, like on the coast, right? So New York, Portland, LA, San Francisco, and they are very much bubbles in a lot of ways where you can find the majority of people have these attitudes that can make you feel really safe.
Yeah. And so in case nobody has seen them, when I make videos for kids, it's about you should be able to play with whatever toys you want. Don't let someone tell you that because you're a girl, you can't do math, stuff like that. Can I tell you something exciting that you helped me to realize right now?
Okay.
People don't have the biggest problem with me being ultra LGBTQ. People have the biggest problem with me loving myself and being LGBTQ. I think it's partly that they've been programmed to think that me loving myself comes at the expense of them somehow, or that the spotlight is not big enough to include everybody, sort of thing. But also, I think just people are programmed to think that if someone is like me, they should hate themselves into the dirt. And if they don't, someone's feels activated to try to stop me loving myself.
My brain immediately went to, why is this true? What are the forces, and all of it. And to your point, I think stepping away from that and just looking at like, this is this moment that we're in, and these are the circumstances. And also the content that you're making is going to be a part of that shift so that it's not, I'm like going to break down in tears just thinking about it because it's like so transformational, that you are a part of this future. And putting yourself in like such risk to do that is really meaningful.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
We are also part of the present. So yes, I'm trying to make it good in the future. But also conversations like this, places like this, where we can connect with each other. This is as much real as all the hate that's out there. This is also an internal process too. The love and hate that's out there is also reflected inside. And I sure as heck can do everything I can to make sure that the inside is a loving, safe, beautiful, gorgeous space. I'm not saying that solves the hate in the world. I'm just saying that I sure as heck can do and devote myself to step by step, little by little, by hook or by crook, every little moment that I can, just being as loving as I can to me.
So, what are some of those rituals or practices that you do personally that help you stay in touch with that self compassion and love?
I just did a semi controversial video about meditation
Mhm.
and how, like meditation is not going to heal racism. But a daily meditation practice does have its place and it helps you to be able to sit with those emotions you've been talking about and sit with yourself in a kind way. So meditation's part of the picture. A daily practice I have is walking and being kind to myself. So I go for a walk every morning and it is just the absolute time for me to be as nice to myself as I can so that no matter what else I do during that day, that is set. We have set that moment. My direct advice is try anything that works. Try things that don't work. Try another thing.
There's so much good advice in your book. So, read or listen to the book at chipmunk speed, obviously. So you're on these walks where your job, your function is to be as kind and loving to yourself. Like, what does that sound like? What are you saying to yourself?
It is the space where I have permission to do whatever feels good. So if that's listening to music or a podcast or listening to nothing, listening to birds. I live in LA, so the weather is nice all year round. Look at flowers, go run a little bit or dance around or whatever. I have permission for myself to have a good time in that space. And I'm literally practicing having a good time. Nobody taught me how, so I'm figuring it out.
I love that.
I mean, I can give you more specifics, but there's not much more to it than that.
I mean, that definitely helps. But I'm also thinking, I had this amazing guest on, Roxy Safai. She was telling this story where she had said something really shitty to herself. And then she out loud was like, oh, shut the fuck up. We are not going to talk to ourselves this way. And it was just like,
Yeah.
it never even occurred to me to have a literal dialogue out loud, checking myself for.
Well, and it's not even yourself. So when I went to the monastery, it was always in the context of the pattern is something that was done to you. So the self-hate dialogue is not me beating myself up. It's actually the program I received. And for sure, you can defend yourself, and you should, against that. I have struved to end up in a place where I'm just thoroughly kind to myself. If you stand up to that inner voice for long enough, just like a little playground bully, it will stop getting what it wants and it'll go away. I realize that's such a dangerous thing to say because I don't want people to hold that up as a standard for themselves and then feel bad if they can't do it. But just the honest truth, I don't spend a lot of my time defending myself against the self-hate in my head because it doesn't come around very much.
Which sounds like a delightful version of future things to say.
It's an absolutely delightful version of life and of love and of kindness.
When you're having inner dialogues, is it in the third person or is it us and we? How does that just...
Oh, good question. It is usually, I love you. I'm glad you're here. So people classically might talk about it like I am talking to my inner child. But of course, it's much more nuanced than that. And to me, we all are parents. That's why I make videos about parenting, because almost all of us are re-parenting if we're not parenting an actual kid outside of us.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say the video, of course, I'm not going to be able to say exactly what was in it, but it was something about loyalty. And if you grew up in a household where loyalty was a priority, you're going to put yourself in abusive situations to prove that you're loyal because of this conditioning. And what was fascinating is that I follow you. So you would think that I would have seen that from you, but the algorithms are mysterious. And instead, I saw it duetted by 3 different Black creators. And it was just like, whoa, this is something that a lot of people have experienced within this community that we've never, been taught or told about. it was like this fascinating moment to me of seeing adults have that reaction of like being seen and validated in real time by somebody like really telling them like, no, it totally makes sense why you're here and why you're doing this thing. Because I feel like as adults, which is the unwiring that we're trying to do, right? But like as adults, we're taught to think that we don't need permission necessarily to show up and function the way that we do. And essentially that ability to just give people permission to honor where they are and understand, I think it's just so cool.
I was so honored whenever people duet one of my videos and talk about their own experience and add their own nuance and have their own moment with it. It's always such a huge honor to me. So, yeah, I'm glad that one sticks out to you.
Okay, so what are you excited about? What do you never really find yourself getting a chance to talk about when you do things like this? Like what's on your mind and heart at the moment?
When I was a kid, I loved My Little Pony and wasn't allowed. So what I've been doing is collecting My Little Pony again. And they've changed quite a lot. And there's been a cartoon, and not to turn it into an ad for My Little Pony, but being able to go back and close some of those gaps of little Jeffrey's soul is something I imagine I'll be doing for the rest of my life, and is one of the things I'm most passionate about. And that's why I'm very grateful for you. I don't have a lot of venues to talk about that. Well, for several reasons, as you could imagine. But, that's one of the things that I'm most passionate about and most happy always to talk about.
Why do you think that it doesn't come up, the ability to chat about it? Is it because a lot of the conversations that you're having are needing out of necessity to start at a more simple place? Or is it because you're not asked more? Like, what is it?
The second one, it's that people are taught once they reach, I don't know, age 6, that they shouldn't have needs anymore.
Mhm.
Right? And that it's dangerous to have needs and you shouldn't be vulnerable and et cetera, et cetera. And so people sort of wall off the part of themselves that's at all vulnerable. And I'm a walking representation of vulnerability. And so there are very few avenues where people like you are willing to go there.
Yeah.
And where people are willing to be open about the process and show the cracks and show the spaces in between and show the ways when we are just a mush and messy and aren't palatable, as you were saying before.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I really wanted to do a podcast, is because in being video creators, there's a container that things live in. There's a certain amount of mindfulness that you have in terms of like, how can I construct this in a way? How can I polish it? How can I, all of these things? Because there's, time limits and all of that stuff. I've always been that person that it's like, let's go there. And have always craved that too. And to me, what's so fascinating is thinking about the way that we're operating as like these avatars of ourselves that people are free to create associations with and make judgments about.
And do.
Right. In a plentiful manner. That then to be able to have this type of interaction where you get to, and not always, I mean, honestly, we don't always get to go there because it depends on the guest, But I think it's so beautiful and amazing when it's just like, okay, we're both here. Like, let's just let it live how it's going to live and like really show up with all the stuff that just makes me so excited to do what I do. I feel like it's lightning in a bottle when it happens, because sometimes, like you said, people, for very understandable reasons, have a protective layer on it.
I'm going to call you in. I'm going to go slowly, though. Don't worry. And I'm going to be charming and cute about it. You rolled your eyes. You said, I'm going to be the person that's always going to go there. And your eyes went up. Could you say a little bit more about that? Because that's annoying to other people, or?
Okay. Yes. Called in the best way. Yes. And it goes back, actually, in my notes, I have this where I feel like we talk so much about not enoughness, but a lot of my story was too muchness. And yes, too muchness, just showing up the way that I've always organically felt called to show up has been perceived as being too much for a lot of the people around me. And this idea of like, we want to have Dixie cup conversations. We want to just like, hi, how you doing? How's the weather? Love you. Bye. And I don't do that. So yes, I have all of this stickiness around it because whilst I know, and this is what I loved in your book that you talked about, usually your superpower is the thing that you were the most critiqued for, that you were the most called out for, because it doesn't fit in this way. And I understand that this is a part of my superpower zone. And also, I have this embedded, sticky residue around it because of the way that it was perceived in those messages that I received as a result of it not fitting into the expectations of the people around me or the capacity, honestly.
So people should seek out the video for your eye look, of course, but also for this moment, because I want the catharsis of it if you're willing to experiment. Look in the camera and say it without the eye roll part. Say how deep you are. If nothing for me, I want to be inspired. Go.
I'm really passionate about having these conversations because I have been a human who has always felt called to go there and have really deep, rich conversations. But I want to say, even if it's a journey, not a destination.
Look in the camera, say, I love going there.
I love going there. I'm a deep fucking human and I appreciate that about myself.
Hello. Right? Because at the end of the day, so people can't handle you. Even if we put ourselves in the tiniest box, people are going to have a problem with us. I put myself in a tiny box for years. Would you even believe I tried to make perfect videos on the internet that wouldn't upset other people for a long time? Ask me how that went. It's never going to happen, right? Even if we constrain ourselves so intensely, just watching you was so exciting and inspiring. You saying it that way gave me permission to be the person who goes there.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I know that permission dance and validation dance because I feel it all the time. And I think that that's why I feel called to create and also why I consume more than sometimes I consciously want to, is because that validation and permission, like actually I was thinking about doing a TED Talk about the story of the ugly duckling. The story is that the ugly duckling grows up, sees swans, and then is like, oh, I'm a swan. I'm not an ugly duckling. And to me, the part that makes that story function is that swans were perceived to be a cool thing to be. Because if not, it would be, oh, I'm that fucking thing. Like,
I'm still not a duck. Oh.
Yeah, this is even worse. And to me, it's being seen, but it's also the appreciation for who you are when you are seen. Like to me, this whole world of creating content and consuming content is such a beautiful way to activate all those centers in yourself that you aren't necessarily consciously aware that need activating. But then you hear somebody say, I suck at self-care, so I decided to do it ironically. And now, and then you're like, oh, I can do that? Okay, I'm going to ironically take a bath with candles. And then you're like, oh my gosh, that actually worked.
Anything that helps, anything that works, do it. That's all I have to say. Try it all. Pull out all of the stops. There's no restriction.
Yeah. Okay, are you ready for the G-Speed round? Only rule is you cannot overthink it. Let's go.
I try not to think at all, actually.
There are so many aspects to who you are that are like, if I could just pick and pluck, I would just be like, beep, 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 beep. This menu looks amazing. So, who was your earliest celebrity crush?
David Bowie.
From the Labyrinth.
I mean, Ziggy Stardust and some gender things going on. Mm-hmm. Really lovely, yeah.
Yeah, totally understandable. Okay, so what is a failure that turned out to be a gift?
Not being able to convince other people that I'm straight. I tried in high school, and I desperately failed. Absolutely, spectacularly. And I thought for years it was because there was something wrong with me. But now I look back and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I failed. I could have wasted even more time if I was good at it.
And did you do like, I remember in high school, there were these like, this is how somebody stands, this is how somebody sits. There was kind of information circulating. And I remember similarly being suddenly very conscious about energy and what I was trying to exude and just like all that pressure of trying to retain all of it that seemed like wasn't helpful.
Yes, you're constantly thinking about everything that's wrong with you and trying to mitigate it, compensate, deflect, all that stuff.
So what is when you're feeling like spicy and you want to clap back? Probably not necessarily going to do it, but like, what is that thing that pops to mind that you're like, ooh, I could totally say this?
To whom?
If somebody is like being a dick online or something, like what's the thing that you want to say, but you wouldn't necessarily because you're not fighting assholery with assholery?
I don't think there is anything I wouldn't say. The best clap back is treating myself with dignity and kindness. Best one I've ever seen. And it's not even for the hater, it's not for their benefit, but it's the other people, the reason I respond to hate sometimes is for the other people, right? The choir that I'm preaching to help people see that you can respond and totally love yourself. It's the best revenge, as we say.
Never let them see you sweat. Okay. When you are being your most magnetic version of yourself, what does that look like?
It looks like this, having a good time, chatting, being around great people.
I love that I can be a part of your magnetism.
You're contributing to it.
Okay. What is a mantra that is really rocking your world right now?
I'm glad you're here. That one really hits the spot for me because so many times I'm trying to compensate. Yeah, I'm trying to be what I need to be or whatever.
Okay, when you're like in a little bit of a slump, you want to crank up the energy, connect with your general bold badassery. What's like that song or like just thing that you can do to like create that connection?
Dance around to musical theater in my apartment.
Anything specific or is it just anything musical theater related?
This may sound weird or slightly niche, but I love a good Julie Andrews. I really do. Because it's that mix of kind of sassy, saucy, but also very dignified. And yeah. I can get down with that.
Icon. She also has this like resonance that is so sexy, which sounds weird because it's Mary Poppins we're talking about. But like, yeah, I don't know. There's something like vocally and just the way that she shows up that's like, I don't know. Do you know, I only recently, last 8 months, caught on to the whole stan phenomenon. Like, it was just a word that didn't even, fit into my lexicon. Like, I didn't clock it. And then, of course, when you know what it means. Yes. Yep. Yes. And it was, in fact, my younger siblings that were like, oh my gosh, I stand so hard. And I was like, you stand so hard for what? And they were like, you're such a millennial right now. Like, okay.
Did you Google it? Or you just sort of picked up on context clues? Or
no, they told me. Yeah. I had an embarrassing moment and then they told me. And then I was like, oh, like from the Eminem song. Like I was around from that. I remember. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
But Gen Z is always down for the humbling moment. Okay. Finish the sentence. I feel most powerful when
I am alone with myself.
# goals. Let everybody know how they can connect with you. Is there anything else coming out aside from the book is amazing and they should get it on the audio version, but how can people connect with you, learn from you and all those amazing things?
I'll tell you a super secret. I signed a second book deal with Penguin. So book number 2 is coming out. It will help people to realize how to take their own advice, that they know what they would tell a friend. There's just a disconnect to them doing it. You're already wise, in other words.
Ooh, I'm so excited. Do you have an idea on timing?
Books take forever, so about 1.5 years.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting. Congratulations.
And to answer your other question, I'm very accessible, jeffreymarsh.com, TikTok, Instagram, all the stuff.
Yeah, all the places. And you do one-on-one coaching too, right?
Absolutely, I do. Yep.
Yeah. So people, if they feel called, can interact with you personally, which I think is really awesome.
Can I brag?
Yeah, please.
People come out of the coaching liking themselves. So that's definitely something to brag about. But people are a little starstruck, and I use that to my advantage. They're a little like, fanning in the beginning. And so I use that energy to be able to give people a space to talk about the things they've never been able to talk about. And that's really where coaching begins to take off. As you know, I'm the ultimate walking safe place to talk about the things that you need talking about that you think other people might judge. I'm the place to be able to talk about that in a judgment-free zone.
I love that you can transmute that dynamic, because one would think that it could be intimidating. And so like leveraging that dynamic to help people reveal more or, show up in a more full way is pretty magic.
Would you give me a word to describe me, an adjective? Me and my work and whatever. What's
Sparkle-tastic?
sparkle-tastic?
Yeah.
Perfect. You described yourself. I am ultimately a mirror for everyone. And the jerks come in to my comments and reveal exactly where they're coming from, because my work
Yeah.
is a mirror for them too. But for you, you see the sparkle-tastic in me because it lives in you. And being able to turn that mirror around is largely what I coach people through.
I love that. We're just going to be sparkly together. It's going to be amazing.
Sparkle-tastic. And enjoy
Sparkle-tastic. Okay, lastly, what does it mean to live boldly?
Radical, complete self-acceptance. People look at that and see confidence, boldness. But really all I know is that when I close the door to my apartment, I'm all by myself, it's dark, I'm getting ready for bed, I'm going to be kind to myself. That's what I got.
I am so delighted when the construction I have of someone based on their work is, as glorious as it is, surpassed by my interaction with them and their actual presence. Like that is just such a lovely feeling. So thank you.
You're most welcome. And, I'm nothing if not genuine. That's what I got going for me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you can see it. Thanks for your generosity. I appreciate it.
What a good episode. And you know what's so funny? We chatted a little bit after this, and it was so funny because I caught myself squirm. And, when that little kid energy comes out where it's like almost you are being loved so much that it makes you feel awkward because you are not used to just sitting in that glow. And so I caught myself like, okay, bye, and getting awkward and feeling awkward. When somebody gives you a compliment and you just want to like karate chop that in the other direction instead of really letting yourself receive that beautiful energy. As you can tell, they have the most wonderful energy ever. And I hope that you go, if you aren't already, which a lot of us are, hello, but that you go and follow and just, I cannot tell you how wonderful it is to just randomly get videos from them showing up in your feed. It is the beautiful interruption for whatever thought patterns you're having. Like that wonderful fairy they parent that sprinkles fabulous self-love dust in the middle of whatever you've got going on. Okay. I love you. This was a wonderful episode. I'm so glad you hung out with us and spent that time with us. As always, if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, share it with a family member, somebody you feel like should listen to it. If you get a ping, pay attention to it, and feel free to screenshot, tag us. It makes me so happy being able to interact with you all and see that this is a real thing that we're doing that's impacting people's lives. I hope you go out this week and you just tap into that honoring energy, that I am proud of myself energy, that I am loving the fact that today I showed up and lived through today with the best intention that I could. I did the best I could. And tomorrow I'm going to do it again. Really giving yourself all the gold stars and cookies that you deserve, because you do deserve it. I fucking love you, and I'll see you next week. Bye.